to our next presenter. The next presenter is Toby Godfray, a postgraduate student from King's College London in United Kingdoms. The title of the thesis is More Than Paint on Concrete. I personally love the title, Conducting a Playful Reimagination of London's Expanding Cycle Network, guided by Luke Dickens under the theme Urban Networks. So Toby, you're next. Please start your
Of
presentation.
course, yeah. Thank you for the introduction, and hopefully my connection holds up. I will just share my presentation. Give me 2 seconds. I haven't used WebEx before. Is that working?
Yeah, it's working. Just make
Brilliant.
it to the
Full
slide
screen.
shape.
Cool. And that's okay?
Yeah, please start.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, right, I'll kick off and try and get through this in 10 minutes. Yeah, thank you for listening, obviously, and I'll give a brief overview of this dissertation, which was, yes, 2 months ago in London whilst I was studying at King's College over here. So yeah, background and motivation. So the reason for me doing this dissertation, I was reading a degree in Sustainable Cities at the time and kind of in this space of urban planning, urban design. I grew an interest across that year in ideas of play and how we can kind of rethink cities from a playful perspective. During that master's, I was interning with an advocacy group here in London called London Cycling Campaign. They're kind of essentially campaigning for better micromobility provision across the capital. And I wrote an article for them on micromobility parking ahead of London's e-scooter trials. And I was also volunteering with a cycle refugee charity. So the context is I was kind of very much in this space and in kind of, planning London's cycle network, which is growing at a very quick rate, as is probably the case in a lot of cities. But I had this kind of feeling, how can we do things better? I'm not a kind of massive cyclist myself in terms of hardcore Tour de France cycling, but I love the idea that, people can get from A to B on a bike. It's, a much kind of more sustainable travel mode. And yeah, wanted to basically rethink how we could design cycle networks. The research needs. So cycling has been written about in literature in a big way. It's really well studied. However, there is a gap in that cycling's kind of infrastructures, as in the network, the kind of physical nature of the network has not been looked at, and its effects on kind of bringing people into cycling and engaging people in cycling. So that was what I was looking at. A lot has been written about to date on its social infrastructures, and what I mean by that is kind of international events like critical mass and basically cycling in numbers and the playful elements of cycling at night in big groups with music, that kind of thing. But yes, never from a design perspective. And I brought this kind of idea of play, which I define at the bottom, which is all these terms of inclusive, it's very urban, it's abstract, it's material, it's political, it's participatory, it's subversive. So this idea of play, how can we apply it to cycling and kind of start to rethink cycle networks? So this was the kind of void, just showing this from a graphical sense. On the left is what has been studied. Essentially, events like critical mass, cycling on numbers, and how playful that is. On the right is the actual physical infrastructures, which hasn't been looked at. So you've got in that top left photo, that's the Van Gogh Starry route in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. You have kind of playful, funny cycle signage. You have ramps. You have cycle responsive lighting in the ground in the bottom right in Copenhagen. So just exploring these ideas and how it kind of brings people into cycling. So that was my kind of premise. So I brought this to London. And as I said earlier, London's cycle network is expanding. It's growing, especially after COVID. So it's very kind of topical, this subject. And essentially the aim is to explore and reassess a playful reimagination of London's expanding cycle network. And that was broken down into a list of objectives, which are on the screen. The photo you can see is one example of a utopian reimagination of London cycling. This was by Norman Foster Architects, where they imagined a new cycle network following essentially all of London's key rail routes and building the cycle network on top. So just one example. But on the main, or in general, this subject hasn't been studied too much to date. So playful reimagination of London cycle network. How do you do this? It's a new topic, so I wanted to speak to people first. So I got together 8 field experts from all over international and kind of interviewed them about this topic, which I'll go into more detail shortly. I then went from that to photography, observation, collation, essentially, basically looking at London Cycle Network and networks from all over the world and what they have done, and trying to like bring all this material together. So I had a kind of base. The final method was drawing, and this was by far the most exciting and rewarding. And you can see the picture on the right. These are booklets that I made and sent out to Londoners all over, and they filled out with various drawings of how they would design London Cycle Network. So yeah, really cool methodology, 3 steps. I'll go through them all in a bit more detail. I just put my positionality in all this research, which is really important in cycling on the bottom left. So I myself, based in the UK, I am white, male, middle class. I have never had any access issues to cycling, whereas a lot of people do. And I'm obviously in a position of privilege where I can think from a kind of really fun, playful perspective. But I understand that, you know, cycling is something that is not accessible for all groups in society, and that is something that needs to happen. Just a quick graphical presentation or representation of how this research played out. So the literature gap on the left, and then the various methods as you go into use photography, drawing, and then collated in the findings. So the actual findings, a lot of text on the screen, I'm not going to read it out, but it's super interesting talking to experts in the field. There is an appetite for this. People or designers really like this idea of play and kind of rethinking networks. The problem is that cycling, especially in London, is massively wrapped up in this discussion around safety. So there's a lot of accidents each year, and the priority is making cycling safe. And play is seen as something that's contradictory to that. So you've got 2 very competing things, and it's really tricky with this research to kind of think, how can we make cycling safe and playful? And that was a bit of a dichotomy I had to handle. But yeah, all these interviews, different backgrounds, people from inclusive design, charities, whatever, all brought together, made some really interesting findings. One of them suggested to me that I do the second method, which was collate findings from all over the world as to what cities have done on kind of playful infrastructure front, because there is at this point in time no one repository, as in a collation of what cities have done. So I basically went out in London and I took a load of photos of the cycle network, which you can see is the left collage. So pretty boring, pretty mundane, as is the title of my dissertation, just paint on concrete. You then have on the right-hand side all these different imaginations of cycle lanes, and that was just one example of infrastructure which I took inspiration from. You can see on the bottom left, so cycle lanes, I had cycle lane barriers, parking, general network furniture. On the bottom right, you can see cycle barriers, just thinking how can we create more aesthetic, fun, engaging cycle infrastructure. The last one, as I said, much more interesting, was the drawing stage. So I created these booklets, I sent out, and the kind of the double page spread would look like it does on the screen. So I'd explain, we have bike lane barriers. So in London at the moment, these are what are called plastic ones. They're absolute rubbish, they're lightweight, they're cheap, and they're a very temporary solution and really horrible to look at. And I said to the people that are filling out this booklet, come on, have some fun with this. What would you do if you could design your own cycle barrier and put it in London? And the kind of findings I got from this were awesome. A lot of drawings on one page. You know, I must have got back over, I think it was over 90 drawings overall of different cycle infrastructures. And I've just put a few on the screen of examples. And analyzing this is amazing because you had such wide ranging ideas. And these weren't coming from cycle experts. These are just, you know, everyday people who had a kind of interest in the subject. One key thing is that when you're analyzing these kind of drawings, it's not about the quality of the drawing itself. That is not the point. As much as it's pretty to look at and more colorful ones catch the eye, it's the ideas behind it. And some of these are amazing. You know, you had all sorts of things. You had planters, you had kind of funky lighting, just very simple interventions, kind of jovial speed cameras, that kind of thing. And yeah, it was an amazing range of findings, which I basically put together. Concluding this all, I appreciate this is very quick fire, and happy to answer questions on it after. So the conclusion of this research, I felt this was a kind of starting point of a discussion. As I said, this topic hadn't really been explored officially to date, and I felt that this is a kind of a really good base for a discussion, and I wanted to kind of promote this more and more. And things like today, you know, talking about it, albeit very quickly and very rushed, is yeah, really exciting that this research is going somewhere. So I think the main takeaway is that we need to be really critical of how we think about cycling and other active travel modes in cities at the moment, how we plan for them, because at the moment it is simply about competing with the car. It's how quick is it to get to A to B? How convenient is it? And I think we should not underappreciate the value of, you know, making cycling super attractive, super fun, and something for all people. The shortcoming of the research, I haven't yet. One of my objectives was to try and, you know, develop something out of this, which would kind of, you know, advocate and kind of push policymakers. I haven't yet done that. That's not to say I won't. As everyone probably on this call knows, you're very tight for time when it comes to undergraduate or postgraduate thesis. But yeah, the last point, personal gain. I absolutely love this topic, and I'm really lucky to have said that. I know a lot of people, their dissertations, it can be a slog. It can be, you get sick of the topic. Not the case for me at all. I've loved this, and I now work as a transport and mobility planner with an architectural firm here in the UK, and a lot of this stuff comes up in my everyday tasks. So I've been able to use it. Yeah, that is my presentation done. Hopefully I was under 10 minutes and you're happy to take questions. So that was a really quick snapshot of a lot of data and research, but yeah, hopefully you found it interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Toby. Absolutely,
Pleasure.
your presentation was very interesting. Dr. Mandor, we can start with you. Please share your thoughts.
Yeah, Toby, this is actually a very interesting and crucial issue, the bikeability in the city. And you tackled, the thesis in a very, scientific and sensual way. It needs actually it's a good work as a base for research on a planning basis for bigger scale and cities. I like the work and I congratulate you for that. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Doctor. Professor Park, would you like to share your thoughts?
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Toby, right?
Yeah,
I love your topic. The cycling, networking is one of the, the rising subject. So it was very fun to see your, passion, and especially you really like to develop, in a unprecedented area. We already studied.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the researches, we already look. I mean, lots of people already look at the kind of, just generic, the area, but you really try to push another boundary, like, playing, especially. So that is very key. I mean, that is one of the important key, I guess. I love to hear that you had a kind of a strategy to find your problems, and at the same time ideas from the interview. That is very crucial as well.
Yeah.
But one note that I need to speak is somehow presenting, the kind of a visual a little bit missing. So of course I could see what is your goal and what you really want to achieve. But unfortunately, personally, I think the sketching is not enough, for general publics. I mean, I remember the spread out, the 40 leaflets kind of thing. But again, but unfortunately, I mean, to the general public, maybe they are not really they could understand well, right? How was
Absolutely.
it? I mean, was it successful? I'm a little bit doubt.
Well, yeah, you're spot on. I think drawing as a kind of method is really fun and engaging, and it allows people to be super creative. But you're right in that it's really hard to translate that into kind of wider findings that you can take on. Exactly, yeah, because you can't really, as amazing as some of those drawings are, you're not going to take that to, say, a council planner in the UK. Like it's not hard weight evidence. It's very kind of creative side of qualitative research. So that's, as I said, one of my shortcomings from this research, I wasn't able to kind of, create a really kind of strong, persuasive argument from it. I just basically, as I said, I kind of started a discussion on it and showed an alternative and what could be. But I think that is still a challenge. I wasn't able to do it in my thesis, but still now I'm looking to trying to think of ways I could maybe advance this and turn it into something a bit more hard weight, I guess, or heavyweight, as you're saying. But yeah,
Yes,
thank
yes.
you.
Yeah,
Appreciate the
absolutely,
feedback.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, your thesis is not ended. So you could just develop it. And then I really hope you continue to work on that, specific topic and area.
Yeah.
And then look forward to seeing, another level of your, the study in the close future. By the way, thank you. And, the congrats for your graduation.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening. Cheers.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Bansal, can you please share?
Yeah. So I think, Toby, I'm really impressed by the passion you have towards this topic. And I think it's something for me which is very new. I've never thought about cycling and how to add playfulness to that. And that's not only for kids, but for everyone.
Yeah.
I really like the idea how you mentioned about your positionality, that how, as a white male and a middle class citizen, how do you see it, as in how do you think playfulness could be added to it, but how it would be different for the other users? And the ideas of sketching, I thought for beginning, it may be a good start, but I find that it would be very difficult to interpret those sketches. And maybe an average citizen or everyone may not be very comfortable with what they want to express through that. But again, very honest of you to mention the shortcomings of your thesis. And I think this is just the beginning, the stepping stone which you have established. And I am sure that in the coming years, I would see what you have brought. And I think this is this is one of the topics which will really gain a lot of momentum with a start from you.
Yeah, thank you. And spot on. Yeah, thank you for the feedback. And yeah, spot on, especially the positionality point. The things you mentioned. I do think play can be a real tool for inclusivity. I stand by that. I think the research I did, it is really open to anyone and anyone to interpret how they see fit. An example where it wasn't was I'd have one interview and, kind of finding from that was, we should kind of come up with really cool lighting schemes and like very like responsive LED lighting. And then I spoke to someone for inclusive design and they're like, that is really not good for anyone with any visual impairments or that kind of thing. And so you have to be really I think that's a broader topic in urban design generally, obviously, like you've got to try and cater for all users. But I do think play is something for that. The other thing you touched on is that a lot of people associate play as being a kind of child-oriented thing and for kids.
Yeah.
And that I kind of really argue heavily against that. I think there's been a lot of literature since COVID on the kind of need for play in cities and tactical urbanism and that kind of things, because what it does is that it alleviates loneliness, isolation, that kind of thing, because you create these kind of spaces that are fun and people feel welcome there, and it kind of fosters community interaction. So that's really important. So, but yeah, regards to the other stuff, again, appreciate the feedback, and I do hope I can take it forward beyond drawings.
Great, thank you.
Toby, we do have a question for you from the audience.
Oh, great, nice.
Do you think there's a potential conflict between the practical functionality of a cycling network and the incorporation of playful elements? How could this balance be achieved?
Yeah, great question. Definitely. There is a conflict for sure. I think it depends how you view cycling. As I said, a lot of people, their approach to cycling is, this is an alternative travel mode, right? So it's about getting from your starting point to your end destination. For those people where it's very functional, then no, as in like play doesn't really come into it. For those like me who think it should be beyond that and the journey itself matters and there's like an emphasis on the experiential nature of it, then definitely that's where incorporating play is like super important. So yes, there is a conflict, but I do think that conflict can be overcome, and increasingly I think people understanding that cycling needs to be seen beyond this kind of really like old school transport planning kind of pragmatic kind of mode. As I said, it needs to we need to start appreciating its really kind of enjoyable elements. So in answer to the question, short answer, yes, there's a huge conflict. I do think it can be overcome, but it takes time and people to be like more open to this subject.
So do you think maybe creating a toolkit would help?
Creating a
Like
what? Sorry, a tool.
toolkit for this incorporation, like you have strategies in your mind, you had the sketches which were made by the audience that you created. So to creating a toolkit would help
Definitely.
solve this issue. Yeah.
That could be a really good way to take this forward, to be honest, a toolkit. Yeah, like generally I think that could be really good, because in that toolkit you could still like include all these visual elements and all the drawings and stuff, but have a bit more kind of stronger writing around it. And like, you know, toolkits can be like really easy to follow, and you have it with a lot of kind of, you know, urban interventions, as I said, it's tactical urbanism or parklets, whatever it may be, these kinds of, you know, increasing trends. I think it could be the same here, just like a kind of playful cycling toolkit. Yeah, I think that could be really strong. And like, as is pretty obvious with this research, it's definitely not applicable to London alone. Like this kind of idea of bringing in play cycling is, you know, applicable to cities all over for sure.
Okay, thank you so much.